Swami Satyamayananda for inviting me here. It has been in my mental horizon, Berkeley, for a very, very long time, because I was kind of nurtured by a Swami who was here, Swami Satyamayananda. And he mentored me in my early monastic years. And he used to speak about Berkeley, so it has a kind of a fondness associated with it. And then I also met another great Swami, Swami Shanta Swarupananda. He was one of those monks who really inspired me into what spiritual life means. And he also was ex-Berkeley. So for me, it is a kind of auspicious time and moment for this to be here. And post-lunch sessions are always so excuse me. In fact, we could have got these students to keep on singing. However, we will take up certain, you can say, aspects of Ramakrishna movement, its contribution to build a cultural and spiritual world. This morning, Swami Vedananda gave us a kind of a few brief factors about when the real order began. And he related various instances. And I was just hoping he shouldn't relate that incident which I'm going to relate to you now. You know, Sri Ramakrishna was at times averse to getting photographed. One day, Bhavanath expressed his wish to have his picture taken. And he had also got along a photographer. And Sri Ramakrishna, as usual, you know, different moods. And he was of a very protean character. That is, he could transform himself into various types and attitudes. So he wasn't willing. And then comes Swami Vivekananda. And he and Bhavanath were very close friends. And then Bhavanath said, see, it must have cost him a lot of money in those days. So, saying, just a moment. He starts singing. And Sri Ramakrishna gets into samadhi. As usual. So he was sitting down on the temple, which is Radhakanta temple in Dakshineshwar. And Swami Vivekananda says, now, quick, click the... And in those days, the contraptions were so kind of, elaborate. You would have to take a black cloth and cover your head along with the camera, etc., etc. So, Sri Ramakrishna's pose wasn't kind of really good enough to be photographed. So, the photographer went and just slightly touched his chin to straighten it up. And Sri Ramakrishna's whole body lifted up from the ground. And Swami Vivekananda screamed, what are you doing? Don't touch it. Take a photograph quick. And the photograph was taken. And to cut a long story short, when Sri Ramakrishna saw his own picture, he said, this represents a high yogic state. This will be worshipped in every home as time passes by. We are all here because of that. And it happened somewhere in February 1884, long before Swami Vivekananda started the Ramakrishna Mission Association 125 years ago. This is and of course, I'm not countering Swami Vedananda's presentation. Yes, there are many factors that were, but this is what started the whole thing. Sri Ramakrishna himself saw his picture being worshipped by Holy Mother in that small concert tower called Nahabat. And hey, what's happening here? And he was mighty pleased. And he himself worshipped his own picture. So this picture, Holy Mother says, not only represents him, but he is ever present in his picture. She says in Bengali, Kai Chai, that is the body and its shadow. The picture is a shadow. So, there are two things here. Swami Vivekananda did not want his great life and message to go without being heard. He wanted his life and message to be systematically preached. This is the reason why the order came into being. Yes. So the order is, in a way, systematically preaching Sri Ramakrishna's, not just us. As Swami Satyamayananda says that, yeah, everybody who kind of internalizes this symbol of the four yogas, which is representative of Sri Ramakrishna, is, in the way, the order of Sri Ramakrishna. The Swami Vivekananda also, in one of his sayings, is saying, preaching work should not be stopped because preaching keeps the order strong. Amazingly. And we have seen, we are talking about the modern day preachers, that's kind of, it's a no-go. During the Buddhistic period and even earlier, missionaries from India used to spread out, and they spread out the entire Asia and changed the cultural landscape and the mind landscape of the whole of Asia, from Alexandria right up to, you can say, Japan. It was the Buddhist monks, which Swami Satyamayananda eloquently spoke about earlier. And how did they change? They changed it only with the tremendous moral force and their spirituality. They never went around with a sword and a burning torch. They converted the whole of Asia by the message of Buddha. Today, we are seeing something like this happening. We may be we are seeing the offing. Things are happening at a tremendous pace. How Sri Ramakrishna's life and message is being spread to all corners of the world. You know, it's kind of, sometimes I feel I'm delirious when I see you all and these children singing. So where? In Berkeley, as Swami Vedananda mentioned, half a world away, in that small place called Dakshineshwar, and Sri Ramakrishna was there, and he came and he's spreading all over the world. So this was the first impetus. His words have to be systematically spread. He tried a lot. As some of the speakers said, he fell in love with organization when he came to America. Well, it's very hard to tell everything that Swami Vivekananda really liked and learned. But Sri Ramakrishna himself, during his penultimate days, used to closet himself with Swami Vivekananda and tell him about how to keep the monks organized and how to work. That happened in Kashipur, when he was suffering from truth. So he laid the foundation stone for the, you can say, future work. Now, even during Swami Vivekananda's time, we're talking about literature, because contribution to build a spiritual and cultural and spiritual world. During his lifetime, he had started the three main publications which are still running today: the Brahmavadin, the Prabuddha Bharata, and the Udbodhan. He himself contributed articles to it. He made his brother disciples go from door to collect subscriptions, he collected funds, arranged for printing press to be transported first to Almora and then Mayavati, which is the home of the Prabhupada Bharata. And I was blessed to be one of the, you can say, editors. When I seen the whole galaxy of editors, one senior monk said, I said, how do I write? What do I write? Well, as you know, in the Upanishads say, Anupashya yata purve. See how your previous generations lived and worked. And that itself. So Swami Vivekananda himself contributed the articles, collected funds for it, and encouraged everybody to start. In fact, the first centers in India, and even here, the first center was technically in New York. Yes, in the Vedanta Society of New York. But that also grew around his message of preaching the yogas and publishing his books. So most of these initial centers, they started, Swami Prapanananda was speaking about the Chennai mutt and the Calcutta mutt and how it started growing. Actually, it grew because of publications. And the whole ashrama activity was centered around this. And as publications grew, the centers also grew. So this was his first, you can say, impetus to put publications, literature on a firm footing. When Swami Trigunatitananda was complaining, the press is kind of lying idle, what do I do? So he said, why? Print my books. Oh, hey, you've got brains. Yeah. So he said, why don't you give me a little brains? Trigunatitananda, who was in San Francisco for many years, why don't you give a little of your brains to me? He's asking Swami Vivekananda. Yeah, Swami Vivekananda humorously says, why don't you give me a little of your digestive powers? Because he could really eat. So that began, it was so many, and the first generation of monks were all involved in publications, printing, books. So this was his first. As printing technology evolved, and so did the centers also evolved. Now we have the latest in printing technology, and it is spreading out all of, even Swami Prasannatmananda, he handed over the books, Swami Vivekananda, friend of all. Yeah. It's a books. Spiritual life is extremely difficult without constant inspiration. If you don't have inspiration, Sri Ramakrishna would say, it's like flattened rice or soaked in water. It will become like that. So you need to have constant inspiration, and literature, spiritual literature, plays an extremely important role in this. Of course, now you have Kindle and this and that, but literature is literature. The next is, as I said, Isha Dhyanananda, though he has spoken elaborately on the 4 yogas, etc. I'll just skip through it. When he said, this represents a high yogic state, it means that Sri Ramakrishna represents yoga. And in one of his Vespers hymns to Sri Ramakrishna, Swami Vivekananda said, Yoga Sahaya, that is a helper in yoga. And you can see how yoga has been spreading. Swami Vivekananda brought yoga to the West, harmonized all the 4 yogas and the various other, and in his harmonization of the yogas, he has harmonized the tantras, the Vedanta, and the yoga philosophy and the Sankhya philosophy. It's amazing. If you read between the lines, it's an amazing work he has done. So he preached Vedanta, as it was mentioned earlier in the morning, that Naren Shikka Devi, Swami Vivekananda will teach the world. He made him the mouthpiece. It also said that this, this incarnation of mind, the whole incarnation of mind is for him, for Vivekananda. So here we are. So he was the voice of Sri Ramakrishna and he preached this yoga. And of course, people have, the other day in Seattle I saw pranify yoga. It's like crucify yoga, something like that. And then instead of, in LA I saw, instead of hot yoga, they made a hot yoga. It's sometimes kind of demoralizing. But these are the people who will question these very principles of yoga and ask, is there something higher? And they are going to come to us. They are going to come to the Vedanta Society or to Vivekananda or Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna, one time, he was ill with cancer, couldn't speak. And Swami Vivekananda, Swami Abhedananda, and Swami Shivananda, they, without telling anybody, ran away to Gaya because they were inspired with the life and teachings of the Buddha. And they went there and they meditated for 3 days, etc., etc. They returned. And Sri Ramakrishna asked, he couldn't speak. He asked, did you find anything anywhere? He said, this time, all spirituality is here. And there it is. Sri Ramakrishna has kind of harmonized not only the yogas and all, practiced all the religions, all the experiences from the absorption of Brahman to the very lowest experience, spiritual experience, he practiced and they are centered into him. And this age, if you want anybody wants spiritual experiences, come here to him. Everything is here. So real spirituality is with Sri Ramakrishna. Okay. So he represents, the order represents yoga. What does literature mean? The simple dictionary meaning is something considered of superior lasting artistic merit, or books and writings published on a particular subject. Well, kind of, it's a flat, you can say, meaning. Humans are much more complex than they believe themselves to be. Our behaviors carry much more information that even we cannot process or no others can process. We are extremely difficult to comprehend people, humans, every human. So this, what is happening is, we learn to observe others and emulate others. And over thousands and thousands of years, we extracted patterns of behavior. Patterns of behavior that spoke about heroism, of either spirituality, or anything say exceptional, and made those models behaviors. It's always like, it's not God gave you the moral sense. No, it's, we have studied our own self. We interacted with our own self, abstracted and extracted the best elements of what we have observed for thousands and thousands of years and crystallized it into certain, you can say, parameters. And we put those tales and it became mythology, and it became art, and it became science and everything. We translated it into music and into drama. So these are patterns of behavior. And if you read the great epics of Ramayana and the Mahabharata, etc., they are nothing but patterns of behavior. How one should behave in the highest possible ethical standards in a particular setting. And that's the reason why these moral imperatives, they kind of impel us. We want to model our own patterns according to those patterns, set before us by long tradition. Who did that? Nobody does it. It's subconsciously done. We learn from others, and now we have something called the mirror neurons. No? You know, we learn from by looking at each other. That's yeah. We mirror each other. So this was the basis of literature. If you say, oh, literature, you know, all the literature, they've come and gone. Never. Spiritual literature is going to last, because the highest ideal of the patterns that one sees over thousands of years are the spiritual patterns. That which takes a mortal and makes that person immortal. This is the literature that's going to stay. And this is part of what literature is. Another aspect of literature is, thank God it's being recorded. Thoughts, you have thousands of thoughts. You ever tried closing your eyes to meditate? We tried it 5 minutes, for 5 minutes in the morning, close your eyes. At least I saw hundreds of thoughts coming in. I don't know what about you. We have thousands of thoughts. I mean literally thousands. The default mode of our brain is to think, and thoughts come, fancies. But thoughts become real when they are articulated. Not before that. Otherwise they are just fancies. So when you speak, that is, when the thought becomes embodied through your nervous system and through your body and everything, to sense organs, they become embodied, they become real. So thoughts which were just thoughts become real on its being spoken of. And that's why they say, in all the scripture you say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, etc. It was the God spoke, and it came to pass. That's why thoughts become real when they are written. And when they are translated into poetry, into music, into art, into drama, into sculpture, it becomes even more real. That is what is spiritual literature. Nothing else. So these are the patterns and these are the thoughts that are coming out slowly. What could be more fundamental to the human soul than its own nature? It's spirituality. So spiritual figures have always have had a central dominant role, at least in India. Not only in India. In fact, if you see the history of Europe also, you will see that it was these saints and all that they really held on to people. In India, we have something called, the deep history. There is history, sociology and economic history, racial history and national history and all history, and history is written by the conquerors, etc. In India, history was written by the sages and saints. Always. This is the deep history, and that really impels society. During these great bhakti movements in the 12th and 13th and 14th centuries, when society was going to get imploded because of all the hundreds of invasions that were coming in. What held people? Nothing but these saints and sages. By their teachings, they lifted masses of people. Today we're talking about social change and equity and this and that, and I laugh at them. India was a home of this kind of huge social movement, lifting people up. It was this spirituality, deep history, written by the sages and saints. Take, for instance, just to make it kind of clear, the Ramcharitmanas, which is the story of Rama's life in the Mind Lake. It was written by Tulsidas Goswami. It's inspired writing. It's not written down from the normal plane of consciousness. they always write it from a very high plane of consciousness. So as an aside, I remember when I was very young, so Swami Ranganathan was one of the great speakers of our order. He became the president also, 13th president. So he was staying in Advaita Ashram and somebody had come to invite him to speak. So he's saying, how many people are there? What type of people are there? So I was kind of a little discomfited. Just go and speak there. What does it matter? And somehow he looks at me. He plucked my thoughts. So later on, those people had gone. When I speak from a high state of consciousness. And that's why I want to know how many people, what are they there. So I learned my lesson, never to question. Yeah, but one of the things that I remember walking beside him, we were going for a talk and walking, and I'm not short, but I'm not tall also. And he was taller than me. But at that moment, I felt like a dwarf. He appeared so towering. And that's what the whole thing is. He used to speak from that. So coming back to this book, it was written by Tulsidas Goswami, the story of Rama's life. And you won't believe it. It was written in the 15th century. For centuries, even till today, it has been the solace and strength of millions and millions and millions of people. One book could hold the people together, lift it up, and contain those, you can say, invasions from outside. Otherwise, society would have simply collapsed. Many people say, Egypt capitulated in 5 years. Persia, huge thing, in a few years. India, for more than 600 years, hasn't capitulated to anyone. Why? I said, you know why? Because of this deep history. Because of it held on to the spirituality. And especially books. Today, if you go into North India, even small children, they can recite the doha, that is the couplets of this Tulsidas Ramayana. And I used to go and I was the kind of, at one time I was a judge for small children reciting these couplets. Amazing. It just held people together. That is what holds people together. What holds society. And these books, I gave you the example of one book, hundreds of books. In this age, the literature of Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Holy Mother are these books, which will hold society, which will mold society, which will transform society. I remember Swami telling me the first time I read the gospel, it was like a spiritual experience. Not like, it was a spiritual experience. Everything that you would ever want or ask or inquire about spiritual life is in that book. And this is, and Sri Ramakrishna, he planned it like that. He made M his Boswell. And he made him write. And then Swami Shivananda also was trying to take notes. He said, no, it's not meant for you. And that work had been earmarked for M, that is Mahendranath Gupta. So this book has always been there, because an avatar comes like you have the Bible that has molded civilization and culture. You have the Quran that has molded civilization and culture. And now you're going to have another book. And this is the gospel. It's a gospel, it's a message for this age. A new type of civilization, a new type of people will come together and be elevated by this. One of the, you can say, the book becomes central. As religions keep on spreading, first they impose that book on people. It has to be, you have to accept this book. If you don't accept it, off with your head. Here, Sri Ramakrishna, his book is spreading by its own power. Yeah, by its own power, there is also another factor here, our spiritual needs. Our spiritual needs are being fulfilled by this book, by this literature. And even people who used to have to impose their books, their prophet, their books, they say the man and the book. There are two things. You either break one of these two things and the whole thing crumbles down. Oh yes, the man, the prophet and the book. Now there are hundreds of, you can say, scholars trying to disprove or prove or whatever things which are there in the prophet's life or which are in the book. In Sri Ramakrishna's life, everything is open. Here it is. He used to say, test me like those money changers test their coins. In the old days, not anymore of course. You should bite the coin to see if it's genuine or not, if it's a fake coin. So Sri Ramakrishna said, test me, test all his sayings, test his life, and you will find them solid. So even the people who made books their centrality, later on, after the fires had died out, that book became the spring of all next generation ideas and third generation, fourth generation. All art, all literature, all subsidiary scriptures came out of that one book. Today you see a huge amount of, you can say, literature based on that one book, either Bible or the Quran or the Zen Avesta or Tripitaka, whatever. Huge. You know what's going to happen with this one gospel? It's going to pour out more and more literature. We are just seeing the beginnings of it. And this is one indication of an order. Now you're saying, oh, we are in the order and this and that, and it's a very ancient order, monks in the world, renewed periodically. The very, you can say, index of our strength means, it implies that the more literature is churned out by the order, the more strong it is. And if the literature goes down a bit, you don't have intellectual stamina, you don't have that spirituality. So literature also, and spiritual literature, is supposed to indicate how strong or how much stronger you are. So this is another aspect of literature. Because, as I said, like we saw in the songs being sung, and then we have dramas, those teachings are being now elaborated, expanded, and tailored to all our individual needs. And the most lasting, you can say, impression of any spiritual culture is its, you can say, depiction in art. Art is, as it were, makes a thing immortal. This is what happens. One of the works, one of the missions, rather, of an avatar. People say, I don't know how many avatars are there in the US, but in India also we have plenty. But there are plenty of avatars here also, don't worry. There are 3 or 4, 5 Jesus Christ now here. So the Jesus Christ of the Jesus Christ. And there are many Ramakrishnas of the Ramakrishnas. So this has been there for beware of false prophets, as they say. One of the works of an avatar is, there are many, is to become an Archana Murti. That is, to present to the world an adorable form to be worshipped. And this form will be worshipped for generations and generations and generations, till the end of, what you call as time. Now we see the form of Rama. You're saying, why Rama? You think Rama is going to go anywhere? No. Of course, he has come as Ramakrishna. But Rama's form will be worshipped till the end of time. Krishna's form, or Buddha's form, or Christ's form, it will be worshipped. They come with that form that is, as it were, imperishable. People worship it. So it's called a Archana Murti. One of the missions of an avatar is to give us a form to be worshipped. And then, what are the means? He also gives you the means. And we know the means is the gospel. And this is the form. So you have the means and you have the end. What more do you want? Of course, we need a little practice. Where does the practice come? You will be forced to come to spirituality, because humans are developing themselves cognitively. We are much cognitively super than our previous generations. There is a need, and for cognitive humanity, the transition to yoga will be very easy. They will take to it like a fish to water. So this is one of the reasons why yoga is spreading. Of course, Isha Dhyanananda has given us an elaborate analysis of, and I like his ending that, So there is a need growing for the yoga. And as I said, we seek patterns. And this pattern is the highest possible pattern of yoga. That is Sri Ramakrishna. So if you want yoga, go to him. If you want spirituality, go to him. Where is he? At least Holy Mother says, Kaya Chaya, that is the body and the shadow. This will overshadow all other things. All other ideals will be replaced by this. As Sri Ramakrishna, it's a common saying, I come to fulfill, never to destroy. This is what's going to happen. Coming to fulfill the spiritual needs of the humanity. Of course, we are going to see a kind of a crisis. We are already in it. Like, one of the crises is, we are in the 6th mass extinction. We are in the beginning. We have 5 already. We have crossed and we almost destroyed our life. So we are already in the 6th mass. It's our greed. It's our wantonness. It's our irresponsibility towards others and to the environment. And we need to put ourselves into order. We speak highly about ourselves, but when it comes to crudeness, there is no one crude than a human being. Yet, the path has been laid out with the highest patterns of spirituality. We need to start ascending it, or we are going to self-destruct. It's as simple as that. This is the need of the time. And like Sri Ramakrishna says, well, now everything is here. You may get a little here and there. You go to this Babaji, that Babaji, this, but everything is here. The people will converge, and this is how society is going to change. You may not be aware of it, but it's there. Like, the common illustration is, if a person is sleeping, is moved along with his bed, you won't even know. So we are moved by this great force of Sri Ramakrishna. Swami Vivekananda likens it to, there's a tremendous power that has risen, the power of Ramakrishna. That is lifting us up. and that is taking us to the highest possible, you can say, goal. So this Sri Ramakrishna is the center, and the center of art and spirituality and etc., etc. Everything that can ever be thought of is. So this is a cultural and spiritual world. You know, as I kept on saying, the culture that really sustains and grows and becomes imperishable is spiritual culture. And that's the reason why you see all the music that these children were singing, they're all spiritual songs. Dance, any form of dance, it has a story, a spiritual story, or a mythological story. Dance and music and art and drama was all spiritual things. And you don't need to do japa and dhyana if you are practicing artist. You can realize God through that. And Sri Ramakrishna also says, those who are good in music, for them it's easy to realize God. So God manifests itself through some talent. So we have this entirety, everything that has a cultural or a spiritual, you can say, theme, will lead you to that goal. So when everything has come from Sri Ramakrishna spreading out, the best way is to worship Sri Ramakrishna through whatever it means that you are competent to deal with, and go back to him. The path is to do your own approach. Never follow others. Never try to imitate others. You're gone, you're finished. Because Sri Ramakrishna himself likes uniqueness. There's one incident where one Brahmo devotee is telling a sub-judge, why don't you accept what he says? That is Sri Ramakrishna. So Sri Ramakrishna separated. What kind of fellow are you? He said, why should he accept everything I say? He should have his own thinking. And that pleased the sub-judge. So you've got to look at Sri Ramakrishna in your own way, develop in your own way, your own culture and your own spirituality. And that is going to represent a part of a pattern that will keep on becoming better and better. And that will be that Archana Murti, that's the form to be worshipped. This is your spirituality. This is it. So one person, it's not a person. You know, when Sri Ramakrishna was asked by Swami Vivekananda, tell your Kali, Mother Kali, to cure you a little so they can eat. So, does anything happen according to my will? No, not. And then later on, he scolds his disciples. You rascal, you made me ask him. I asked Mother, cure me a little so I can eat. Then Mother showed me that I'm eating through so many mouths. Why you're eating through so many mouths? So the idea is we are in a way representing that ancient spirituality. One of the things that Sri Ramakrishna did was to harmonize all the previous stages of spiritual growth, not only all levels of spiritual, the past. He authenticated each and every book, each and every saint. That is another work of an avatar. So he's not developing on something new. It's a part of a long continuing. That continuum has thousands and thousands of years. Hoary roots are there. He brought the whole force of that ancient traditions into his own, you can say, unique style of spreading it out. So today, Sri Ramakrishna has to be developed. Right. Before I conclude, I'll just mention, Sri Ramakrishna used to ask everybody, so what do you think of me? So I'm not going to ask you now. You think for yourself. You have to develop Sri Ramakrishna in your own unique way. There were others who say, oh, you are God, you are the source of all the avatars, etc. It depends on now how you look at Sri Ramakrishna, what is your relationship with him, how you can develop further. That will be your own spiritual culture embedded within the larger spiritual culture of Ramakrishna. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.